Always nice to see some of the players sharing things they would like to get a little bit better at. It is some of them I would question a little bit more. It's depressing how many people say Hearthstone as well as the thing they would choose to get better at. Maybe they need to broaden their
Sure.
horizons. But
Do you know how much money there is at stake when we get to global finals? I think that's a perfectly solid answer.
fair enough. I mean, clearly based on yesterday's performance, maybe I should be wishing for the same thing. But either way, che0nsu up against Ryvius. Ryvius, a player just treat the fact that Asia-Pacific got a little bit homogenous in the meta game. A lot of players bringing the same stuff week in, week out. Ryvius was always just innovating, tinkering with his deck list, and finding something a little bit spicy to come up with. And that's exactly what he's got for us this week as well.
Yeah, the innovation both from, I guess, an archetype that we didn't see very much at all in the weekend, which is Galakron Priest. We've seen Res Priest and Highlander, but the pure actual full Invoke package is something that's a little bit more unusual. And also just innovation in terms of the tech choices in well-loved and well-represented archetypes. I'm looking at the Druid in particular. He's got that Ysera at the top end there.
He does indeed. It's a pretty cool version of the deck. Ysera was looking very strong indeed, but for che0nsu first, on the other side, we can see the very standard Demon Hunter that's looking, well, completely ubiquitous for the Asia-Pacific region. 16 for 16 players brought some kind of Demon Hunter. The Druid and the Resurrect Priest, fairly standard stuff. I suppose the only kind of top-tier deck that che0nsu opted not to bring was the Galakron Warlock. But the deck that's been banned away for him, somewhat interestingly, is the Warrior, the Bomb Warrior, which really has felt to me like the sleeper hit so far of APAC Grandmasters.
The sleeper hit and brought by all three of the Korean players who made it to top 8, and all three of those players are now playing today in top 4, so it's definitely got something good going on for it. And I do imagine that, you know, of course, within one region, the players will be more likely to practice with each other. So
Yeah.
I do think that they put their heads together coming up with at least the archetype, if not the entire list. And if they're banning it out of respect, then they also know just how strong the power level actually is.
Very, very true. Also a big fan of che0nsu's Druid list that we see there, cutting one Savage Roar, one Rising Winds in favor of Gift of the Wild and Forest Aid compared to the Japanese players' lists in Glory and Possessi. I think this gives it a little bit more late game power that you need to be able to fight back against the control decks. But for Ryvius on the other side, man, we're talking about Warrior being targeted, or at least targeted for a ban. And that's happened again. Ryvius has had his Warrior targeted on the other side, leaving him with just Priest, Demon Hunter, and Druid, same as che0nsu.
Yeah, I can understand the reasoning behind it because it seems like the Warrior is pretty much as aggressive as Demon Hunter in terms of the damage it can put out in the early game and really sustain that into the late game, on top of also having the package to control the board and gain a lot of armor. So it feels like it's in a good spot against basically everything else that they brought. The priests are quite slow, and the bombs I could see that running them over. They've got the removal of small Demon Hunter minions, and they've got the removal to deal with Druid boards. So I understand Warrior not being seen at all for this series, although it is a little bit sad.
Yes, it is. It's a deck that I really enjoy watching people play. I think Warrior, in general, is a very difficult deck to play at the moment with all the combos that can be achieved with a Risky Skipper, Armorsmith, Battle Rage, drawing a million cards, and all that goodness. But before we get into that, we're going to have to go with the Priest and the Demon Hunter here for che0nsu. Ryvius has the combo Demon Hunter, whereas as you can see, che0nsu has the more standard tempo Demon Hunter. If I had to guess, I would say that che0nsu would much prefer to have the OTK combo variant here, because if there's one thing that Ryvius's Priest has proven to be good at, it's keeping up with the aggro decks very well.
And I would definitely agree with that. He is running the full AoE package, you might say, in terms of the double Breath of the Infinite, double Holy Nova, and double Plague of Death. And I just noticed that che0nsu is rocking the 1000 win portrait of Demon Hunter, which, like, I'm pretty sure no one's achieved that yet. Like, actually achieved that. That is the super account with all the portraits unlocked.
Well, I mean, players are getting really close, because I know that Elefanti, a player who's been grinding an incredible amount of Demon Hunter on Europe, he was at 500 wins days ago. But I think there was a because I don't know if they didn't expect anyone to get that far. I think there was a slight issue where it froze at 499. He couldn't actually get up to 500 because, yeah, I mean, well, who thinks that people like that exist? But people really like themselves some Demon Hunter. That is for sure.
And going back into the game, che0nsu had a pretty premium start. Battlefield into the mini muster for battle, we might call it. And Ryvius had a pretty good curve to begin with. We saw him actually 3-peat the cards, which we didn't get to discuss much, but I found that a little bit surprising that playing minions on curve definitely doesn't keep up with the quality of the minions that the Demon Hunter would produce. Instead, you're probably rather looking for Breath of the Infinite.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think just keeping a 1-drop at the very least, though, is perfectly fine. And with Madame Lazul, you're fairly likely to find something like a maybe a Twin Slice and Altruist that you can use to clear the board yourself anyway. But the really funny thing for me is for Ryvius is that he played, he got Evil Conscriptor off of Disciple of Galakrond, and then he got Evil Conscriptor off the Faceless Lackey that he generated off of the Evil Conscriptor. So he's generating a ridiculous amount of value here, and pulling himself way into the lead with that Apotheosis as well.
That was an incredible pull, managing to even take a value trade. It'll keep him healthy, just basically negating the damage. But che0nsu, with the second Umbra Wing draw, is also in a pretty good spot. You can keep extending here. It generally gets to the point as Demon Hunter when you know that the matchup is not exactly that good, where you're just saying, make them have the Holy Nova, make them have the Breath of the Infinite. If it's not there, you're in a great spot.
Or make them have the Waste Warden. Look at this, 3 demons on the board. Blast them out. Obviously, there's still a little bit of attack on the board, but I've got to be honest, that looks pretty juicy to me.
It does indeed. And che0nsu, I mean, it's getting to turn 5 already, and he can play, okay, that definitely looks better than Metamorphosis. I was going to say he can play Metamorphosis or go for it, some type of board development with Satyr Overseer, but the Glaive-bound Adept off the top, definitely the best option. He can remove the 3/3 without having to sacrifice his minions and continue developing.
Question is, does he go for double Twin Slice in addition? Oh, wow, he's going for neither.
Interesting. I think this is pretty indicative of a read from che0nsu's perspective that if you're playing Waste Warden on 5, when you would much rather have played Breath of the Infinite or Holy Nova, perhaps it is not there in hand, and he takes this opportunity to just, once again, make Ryvius have it.
I mean, that's fair, but at the same time, it doesn't put more attack on the board. It actually puts 1 less attack on the board. I guess it's attack that's less vulnerable to Shadow or Death, I suppose. He's not running those in the deck. Or a Time Rip, I guess, as well, yeah. Not completely convinced.
Me neither. Maybe there's a specific minion he was thinking about how it would line up better into. For the moment, che0nsu does have the next few turns kind of planned out. It's going to be some type of Glaive-bound Adept this turn. Whether he wants to use Second Slice or just Hero Power. I do like using the Slice so you can also develop the Battle Mage. And then it rolls into a great turn 7 where you can Hero Power, Metamorphosis, Hero Power again.
Yeah, I think it's one of those situations for che0nsu where you are quite clearly saying, all right, if you've got the Soul Mirror, brilliant, you've won the board, but he still has an out of just going for pure face damage and hope that that gets there if he gets a Warglaives of Azzinoth later on.
And pretty good recognition from che0nsu there that he didn't even have to commit the 1 damage into the minion. Because the Lackey would only have been able to damage the Glaive-bound down to 3 health, which is still surviving a lot of the AoE breakpoints. Unfortunately for him, though, Ryvius had the best AoE for that situation. But now che0nsu can turn on the Metamorphosis, make Ryvius have the healing, and for now it's just a Renew and the Hero Power.
That can turn around very quickly, though. If there's one thing this deck does well, it is healing. There's a Sant of Water Bearer in the deck. Obviously, this could discover more healing. That's not more healing, though.
So now the Shield of Galakrond prevents at least the Hero Power or some type of weapon going for face, but he still has to worry about the second charge off of the Metamorphosis, and che0nsu does have a guaranteed 2 draws off of the Outcast.
Okay, Glaive Bound next turn it's going to have to be, but that's okay.
Now the question is, where does he send this mini fireball? Going into the minion does make sense because, for
Yeah.
one, it technically puts him ahead on board. So in the best case scenario, which he does have to hope for from this spot, the Battle Fiend might also still be able to go face. And then the Glaive Bound Twin Slice would deal the 5 that the Metamorphosis would have done anyway.
Yeah, that's right. It opens up so many more draws as well to get lethal. We're looking at all of a sudden the Warglaives of Azianoth, Chaos Strike, anything like that that can be used to just ramp up the damage that little bit more.
We are all bound to fate.
So Ryvius starting by discounting his whole hand, pretty much a free Fate Weaver play. And even gains him some more mana. The Breath of the Infinite gonna clear off che0nsu's immediate threats.
He could go for like, because he really wants to save mana to heal his face, so he could go Cool Tyran Champion as well. Or Cool Tyran Chaplain, sorry.
It does look like it is slipping a bit away from che0nsu here. Take a quick look at the deck list and see what kind of other burst he can scrounge together, because this will be the second Glaive Bound and the Metamorphosis has been used.
Yeah, so in terms of outs, we are looking at
Warglaives.
Warglaives is just going to be that little bit short, but it could deliver a 2-turn lethal,
Perhaps.
I suppose.
And there's also che0n, at the very least. That is a charge minion. And technically Altruist, but I'm having a hard time seeing some type of Altruist lethal come together without at least a Skull of Gul'dan giving him more ammo. And with the Madame Lazul for 1 card, Ryvius now also just has perfect information.
Yeah, it's kind of funny here how Ryvius could potentially go for a all face, play the Frenzied Felwing, and then have gone for Skull of Gul'dan on the same turn, but given that he had no other easy way of killing off the Glaive Bound Adept, it does make sense to just clear it off like that.
Altruist. For Ryvius though, I mean, ideally for him, he wanted to find a way to both remove the Glaive Bound and set up a guaranteed 2-turn lethal, but it looks like he's still going to be a little bit short. che0nsu could have a little bit more time to draw into either Skull or Glaives or che0n.
He's got a lot of good cards in his deck. It's 2 more Skulls. I believe there's a second Spectral Sight in there as well. Even a Sightless Watcher maybe is not too slow and could get there.
I wonder a little bit about him using the Altruist on specifically that turn. Do you think he could have waited to get a little more juice out of it? Granted, in most cases, it is just 1 more prop.
Right, and I think the thing is, if he hits a card like Skull of Gul'dan, he's hit Skull of Gul'dan anyway, he's probably in a pretty good spot, and I think going for it there probably bought him the extra turn he needed to try and find that the turn after. But whatever he's going to find, it does have to be right now. Sightless Watcher off the top is not going to do it, and that does mean that Ryvius takes the win up against the Demon Hunter. And we were talking about this yesterday, Gia, how the overall lineup for Ryvius does feel, if not entirely dedicated to this strategy, a consideration he definitely had at the very least was targeting this Demon Hunter with Combo Demon Hunter, which is a fantastic matchup. Galakrond Priest, which from what we've seen there looks like a pretty fantastic matchup, as well as the Warrior, which got banned, and even the Druid to an extent. I think if he can keep beating this Demon Hunter, that's probably Ryvius' best chance of taking the series.
Yeah, we definitely saw him not give it the ban in many series. I believe it was only against specifically Tom, where he ended up banning the Demon Hunter, and we weren't completely clear on the reasoning for that yet, other than us just conjecturing that Tom's remaining decks maybe didn't seem scary enough to Ryvius, as they were all a little bit unusual as well.
Yeah, you got to remember, even if you're trying to target a deck, Demon Hunter is probably the best deck in the game at the moment. So you got to be always cautious about trying to go for that. It's sort of a double-edged sword with targeting in Conquest, because the deck you're most likely to face is also the deck you're most likely to lose to, because it's probably the best deck in the metagame at the moment. But it's starting off very well at the very least for Ryvius. He's now only got his Demon Hunter and his Druid remaining behind. And the Demon Hunter in particular, although he has lost to aggro Demon Hunter so far this weekend in that matchup, I think is a really nice way to get things going.
And I do remember that specific matchup against Possessi, was it? Where Ryvius, if he had survived that one turn, we were saying he would look to be in a very incredible position, but Possessi top decked exactly the twin slice, which is what he needed to
Oh
close
yeah.
out the game in that very small window. So I don't necessarily think that Ryvius would feel too bad about queuing that matchup again. I think that the numbers still favor him and that his play has definitely been backing that up.
Well, we'll have to see after we get into the rest of the series. We're going to have a short break first, but then will it be the Demon Hunter for Ryvius or the Druid? We'll have to find out right after this. Welcome back to Hearthstone Grandmasters here for the Asia-Pacific region. It's Sunday, which means we are finding out who our champion for the first week of Swiss is going to be for all three regions as well, not just here in Asia-Pacific. Once we find out who it is here a little bit later on today, we're going to send you straight over to Europe and then the Americas at the end of the day. So there's a whole full day of Hearthstone coming up. And the first series of the day is still going on. It's che0nsu versus Ryvius. And as we were saying, Ryvius off to a very, very nice start there by getting the win against the aggro tempo Demon Hunter from che0nsu. And now I think che0nsu is switching things up a little bit with his game plan. He's not going back on the Demon Hunter straight away.
Yeah, they are now reversing classes, as it turns out. che0nsu will now be queuing up his Priest, which is more on the Resurrect side, not really running any invokes for Galakrond. Whereas Ryvius also has a different archetype on the Demon Hunter, which is the OTK version. And yet again, it feels like Ryvius is in a pretty strong spot. I will say, though, that the Res Priest runs quite a few taunts in the deck. and Ryvius is cutting che0n from his OTK version. So it might be a little bit difficult to actually ship that hero power damage face.
I feel like this is one of the matchups that people aren't necessarily sure whether it's super favored, or on the exact percentages of what the matchup may be. But the one thing I think everyone can agree on is that for the Demon Hunter, this matchup is really, really difficult to play. It's such a fine line you have to be able to strike between, you know, when do you throw down your che0nsu for the big turn? Do you do it earlier than you might usually do because you're afraid of taunts later on? Or do you go for it right at the end of the game when they've gone for a huge board of all their taunts and then you can Altruist out the way? How do you use your consume magic as well to try and silence off those taunts? You've only got 2 of them in your deck. There's no che0n either for Ryvius, which makes things even harder. I think Ryvius may be in a bit of a tough spot here, but if he pilots it to the best of his ability, then at the very least we're going to be in for a very good game.
Yeah, and already you made up that point about the consume magic, and it looks kind of tempting just here so you can immediately get the outcast effect, but it seems like Ryvius is prioritizing making sure that it lands onto a taunt minion that he'll need to get out of the way later, or perhaps maybe saving it for just more value off of something like Altruist. I even also want to point out the timing of mana burn could also be very important, because Priest definitely has these specific mana breakpoints where they want to do their powerful things. The AoE comes to mind, maybe not so much in the OTK Demon Hunter matchup, but also just summoning specific minions, the Kartut Defender being a big one.
That's a great point, because the actual amount of hard removal in this Priest deck is pretty much non-existent, actually. You know, no Shadow of Death, no Time Rip, despite the Galakron being in there. So their kind of hardest piece of removal is the Plague of Death right at the end of the deck. And if you're going for a mana burn on turn 10, that's all of a sudden unplayable. Maybe your che0nsu sticks. It's a very, very difficult matchup to pilot.
And we do see Ryvius play the first mana burn, maybe more so of a priority to make the I-Beam cheap enough to get the nice removal onto the Albatross. But I guess it also had that nice side benefit of if che0nsu had Convincing Infiltrator, for example, in hand, it would not be playable this turn.
Really weird in terms of the Outcast as well, because for Ryvius, now that he's found Skull of Gul'dan on the right-hand side, he's still in with a chance of being able to play it from the right. But it's looking like he might actually have to play it from the left now with the Chaos Strike found. He just drew another card there off the Novice Engineer. But if he wants to do that for the Outcast effect, he's going to have to play a Consume Magic, which is one less silence that's gone for the end of the game. So maybe we're just going to see him throw down Skull of Gul'dan, but just draw 3 cards.
Oof, it sounds like not a very nice prospect. And the bad luck Albatross, the keep from che0nsu into drawing the second one and then reviving another one with Psychopomp is very annoying for Ryvius, for any OTK deck, really, because it just takes you that much longer to get to your important cards. And we see Ryvius tossing out the other silence card. So that's already his answers for taunts down the drain. I'm pretty sure che0nsu is not too sad about this outcome.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you know, Ryvius has the Skull of Gul'dan able to be Outcast next turn, which is fantastic. That's always what you want to do. But he's used a Twin Slice, a Coin, 2 mana burns, a Consume Magic. These are a lot of premium cheap spells to combo with che0nsu later on in the game. He may find himself just without the necessary cards to even play these Inner Demons later on in the game.
And going back to che0nsu's turn, he made the play really quick of just going for Holy Nova when he had actually a pretty clean turn to just play Galakron and get it developed. But I think he realizes that in this matchup, the original Priest hero power is much better than generating random minions. Maybe not 100% better, but if you can just outlast the burn from the Demon Hunter, it seems better than trying to dig for specifically taunts off of the random minion.
But speaking of outlasting the burn, it's looking like that may not necessarily be possible. If Ryvius finds himself the second Twin Slice, he is looking at a staggering amount of damage already at this point in the game.
Yeah, and che0nsu, we were talking about taunts, but he just hasn't drawn any of them. And even though he's got a bunch of minions in the res pool, they're pretty much all Albatrosses. And Ryvius, he's got the juice. It's just how much damage is this right now? Is Short being able to play both Inner Demons, because that's already the second half of the Twin Slice in hand, I believe.
Yeah, you definitely start with a Chaos Strike. It still leaves you the option to go Kael fast if you need to, but I have the suspicion that it's not quite worth it yet, and Ryvius seems to agree. Skull of Gul'dan onto the top. That looks pretty good to me.
Indeed, it does. Is there any argument for taking, say, I-Beam to be just another cheap spell for Kael'thas if he's looking to just end the game immediately?
I grow
Definitely some
impatient.
consideration for it, right?
Because then he can go for 4 cheap spells, meaning 2 free Inner Demons.
So that's
And-
what, 16 damage, 18 with the weapon, 23 with the new hero power as well. Which is not... Oh no, wait, which is actually looking like it would be lethal unless che0nsu is able to heal.
Right.
So maybe he did just go for the I-Beam.
Yeah.
If he did, he'll be happy.
And Ryvius will be very happy to see this. Not a single taunt, and the way che0nsu talked about him. Oh, okay. So now how much damage is this? With the hero power, surely it still gets there, right? Maybe not 100%. So there's 6 on board, 11 with the hero power, 12 with the Twin Slice, and 20 with 1 Inner Demon. So he's actually a bit short now, lacking the 4th cheap spell. So, I mean, this is caster vision. The I-Beam would have been the pick, but maybe Ryvius was expecting some type of removal onto his board or a taunt minion and went for the more
Oh, but
consistent weighted outplay of the spell.
He wouldn't have had mana to go for the hero power as well, right? Because he would have had to have gone 2 mana spell plus 1
Oh,
mana
you're right. But would the hero power have been needed at that point?
If
Because-
these minions had stuck around, yes, but he couldn't have necessarily relied on the minions sticking around because it could have been
True.
a Plague of Death to come down. So I think for Ryvius, having worked through the actual discrete numbers, it was probably the correct decision that he went for.
I can definitely see that. I mean, we're not saying that the I-Beam was the correct choice there, just that in this particular situation, it may or may not have won.
Yes, I think it would have won the game here, but on average, obviously it's a different discussion.
Yes. And of course, Skull of Gul'dan just, in many other situations, just gives you the juice to more likely close out the game in the following turns. And he still found the
Alpha's off
lethal
the top.
anyway.
Yeah, he just gets it anyway. Just a little bit of extra damage that he needed to be able to close out the game. We were talking about averages, whether or not, he should have gone for this, should have gone for that. Turns out, Skull of Gul'dan is just a pretty powerful card. And Altruist for the 2 extra damage needed to close out the game. Man, Ryvius is looking really, really strong. Obviously, none of the taunts came into play there for che0nsu, and the Albatrosses ended up being, really just an annoyance more than anything else to Ryvius. Maybe you couldn't even call them that. He was just sailing on with his game plan very, very happily, and was able to come to a not entirely expected necessarily, but very welcome win.
Yeah, very well played from Ryvius there, realizing that the Skull, with Kael'thas in hand, even though it looks like an expensive spell, it pretty much can just do everything that the I-Beam option would have given him and more, given that you just draw something cheap off of it. So good recognition there, and the matchup did look very one-sided on the OTK Demon Hunters end, but I'm curious how the average pan out actually works, because again, we didn't see any taunts from che0nsu, and the no Kayn version maybe in more situations would struggle.
Yeah, it's definitely not the standard way people are building it. Kayn seems to have found its way into most of the builds, but the Demon Hunter is now out of the way for Ryvius, so we don't have to worry about that. Instead, we're going to take a look at his final remaining deck here in this best of 5. It is going to be the Druid for him here with that. You already know it's coming, a signature Ryvius twist on the deck. Ysera Unleashed. I had never seen this put into the recent builds of Spell Druid until Ryvius brought it this weekend. And the one time we did see it come down, it just locked out the game. It wasn't even close.
It was an absolute powerhouse, and we were talking about just our very, very pleb ideas of maybe putting in Zephyrus. I mean, at the end of the deck gives you some flexibility because you're drawing so much. But yeah, Ysera just does that a lot better. It uses all your mana for that turn, and just if you have few cards left in your deck, you're bound to summon more of the dragons consistently. And going wide on board is exactly what this Druid wants to do. So he's actually gone the opposite direction, I would say, from what our Japanese players in the top 8 have done. Possessi and Glory cutting the top end in order for more Savage Roars to be included. Now Ryvius is instead cutting some of that burst, and I believe one Mount Seller to be able to play Ysera.
Yeah, to be fair though, I still think that Ryvius' list is quite well balanced. It definitely hasn't gutted all of the anti-aggro potential. It's still got double Crystal Power, double Wrath, even a Starfall as kind of bonus removal, which is a very powerful card against the Demon Hunter when, as we keep talking about, pretty much all their minions have 2 health. Starfall is a fantastic card.
Not to mention, very good tech in the mirror, definitely game-defining in many
Very
situations. And we already saw from Ryvius's mulligan that he is prioritizing removal there. He kept the Moonfire and the Crystal Power to try and keep up, or not really keep up, but just survive the early onslaught from che0nsu's Temple Demon Hunter.
A little bit of an awkward hand for che0nsu, it's got to be said. Obviously, the 1-2 curve is fantastic, but both Spectral Sights being sandwiched in the middle of the hand between Altruist and the Warglaives, neither of which you really want to play at this point, or have the ability to play. So I think we saw him pick the Satyr off the top, which is something that he could play down on this turn with a hero power as well. Oof,
that is
quite
quite
nice aggressive push.
a top deck. I mean, in theory, let's say he drew something unplayable this turn, let's say Skull. Would you ever tempo the Outcast, the Altruist there?
Well, he knew that he was going to top deck it because he played Sightless Watcher last turn. But I mean, if he hadn't had that, I suppose... I think actually probably not. I think it's too valuable against Druid. He'd probably just play Spectral Sight to draw for 1.
It's true. I mean, it is the only way really for Tempo Demon Hunter and not OTK Demon Hunter to clear a board full of Glowflies. But having used the coin there is pretty expensive for che0nsu because he can't just play a nice and easy Warglaives on this turn. But hey, the top deck, I guess the last one doesn't really count as a top deck, of course. But this one gives him something to do. Frozen Shadow Weaver, a new neutral card. There's actually quite a lot of neutral cards in Outland seeing play in top decks.
Yeah, it really feels like part of the new design philosophy. It was the same case in Descent of Dragons as well. They're just really beefing up the stats on the neutral minions, which I'm a huge fan of. Much more interesting to play and build. But top deck of Frenzied Fellwing there for che0nsu is huge. Ryvius is praying. You can just see, please don't get the strike. But because he messed up the order, che0nsu now can't clear the board.
Right, and we see him head in hands. If he had gone at face with his minions first in the Fellwing for 0 mana instead first as an Outcast proc for Altruist, then the Glowflies would have been cleared.
It.
Yeah.
He just realized.
That's a disaster.
Ryvius had his hands together praying that Hearthstone wouldn't mess him over, but it turns out che0nsu himself just gave Ryvius what looks like the game. I mean, he doesn't have the buffs in hand, so he can't win on this turn. But what just went from a disaster for Ryvius is just put him in the driving seat. He's winning now.
It does seem so, and now if you're che0nsu, you've got to make a decision and, you know, suck it up. You made a mistake, but now what's the best spot you can possibly put yourself in? And it is to ship some of that damage face. Ryvius now can take control with some type of Soul of the Forest play, I would assume.
Yeah.
Just trade off the board, consolidate what's left.
It's so brutal. It's a situation I've been in myself so many times where you just think, okay, you draw first, you draw first. It's a meme in Hearthstone where people say, oh, tap last, by the way, drawing last. You get mocked for doing it that way around. But in that particular instance for che0nsu, correct Hearthstone play in the traditional sense was his undoing.
And you can see the effect it has on him because the last game of the series, if it is indeed a loss for che0nsu, and that's it for the day because we are not playing a double elimination bracket on Sundays. We're just playing single elims, and this could have been that just possibly lost che0nsu up to 2 points in Swiss.
And it really just shows how brutal things can be at the top level of Hearthstone. 2 days he played. He sailed through the winners bracket on Friday and got here. And it turns out that just one mistake may be what costs him the game. Maybe not. Maybe he can still take the win with the Warglaves of Azzinoth, but it's looking to me like Ryvius may just be able to take this one.
Right. As long as Ryvius puts another beefy taunt in the way, I'm looking at the Mount Seller, and that's just not enough for the Warglaves. I mean, the Warglaves is not enough to push through that, and then che0nsu will not get there. Although, good on che0nsu for recognizing from this spot where he must be incredibly tilted that shipping his hero power face is the best chance he's got at winning the game now. Wait a second.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. Just baiting it out. Yeah, I think he was trying to draw as much as possible to find overflow for the next turn so that he can heal up just in case. And now, if we see...
che0nsu still has a chance, right? With a draw of Twin Slice, for example, could attack both Treants.
Yep.
Go face, and he has the other half of the Metamorphosis. And that's not it, though. I mean, imagine...
Spectral Sight into Twin Slice is not lethal because he'd need the hero power.
Yeah. So into... Does he have the other Twin Slice left, perhaps, if it's exactly those two?
I think if it's exactly double Twin Slice.
Yes. And we see that's not it. And granted, I don't think that that would have been a very fair way to win the game.
Yeah.
Granted.
Well, actually, the other out for him there, sorry, at the start of the turn was also Glaive-bound Adept. He could have gone here, swing with the hero power, or sorry, go for the Metamorphosis hero power, swing with his regular hero power, and then play the Glaive-bound Adept face. But either way, none of that matters now in a devastating final game there for che0nsu. Really just out of character for him, to be perfectly honest. It does mean that Ryvius is going to be sweeping this series 3-0 right out the gate, and he is our first finalist for today.
And I have to say, I mean, part of me is happy because I did tag him as my favorite to win this, but man, that must be such a heartbreaker for che0nsu, because we were saying at before today's matches even started that he's one of the fastest players in APAC. Maybe it helps once in a while rein it back a little bit and take the time to consider the turn. Of course, it happens to everyone. It's bound to happen at some point if you're playing at that speed, and yeah, hopefully he can just get his mental state back together for next week.
We'll have to hope so. It's not all doom and gloom for him, though. Getting through to top 4, he does still get those 4 points in this first week of Swiss, which is a very, very big deal. You know, compare that to the players down at the bottom who are getting 1. He's already 4 times better than they are, and very likely still to get through to Division A once the round robin kicks about. But for Ryvius, he really is the man of the hour right now, and I mean, targeting that Demon Hunter is looking like a very strong strategy. He clearly had a very good time going through the Swiss, even though we didn't get to see that. And there against che0nsu, you know, you can call it a blunder, but at the end of the day, he did still beat the Demon Hunter twice in that series very convincingly.
Yeah, perhaps in most panouts, maybe the Demon Hunter would have gone through the Druid, but of course, the rest of che0nsu's lineup would also have to try and beat what Ryvius had to offer. And I do think that that build of Druid from Ryvius could be making its way to close to the optimal list. I really just like this Ysera inclusion, no bias.
Yeah, I think it's really, really cool at the very least. But let's hop over to the bracket now to see what is coming up later on in the day. Now that we've said goodbye to che0nsu, sadly, it does mean Ryvius is moving on to the finals. He will be playing later today against either Possessi or Surrender. That's going to be our next match. The winner will go on to face Ryvius. The loser, sadly, will be leaving with just 4 points. But as we said, it's not that bad. And at the very least, I think it's going to be a really exciting game of Hearthstone.
For sure. And sadly, we only have 3 matches today, guys. And you did say we have a full day of Hearthstone. And I think this is actually probably watchable in one sitting now to go through all the regions. I mean, you'd still have to be a little bit degen like myself to watch that much Hearthstone in a row. But now it is just single elimination in the top 4. And it really does feel like a bona fide tournament every single week, which I do love about this new and improved Grandmasters format.
Yeah, it's very, very exciting stuff. And so moving over to my new deck list, Surrender versus Possessi. Getting my